Hi there, I want to talk about cameras, specifically this type of camera, which is called an SLR or single lens reflex camera. They're called that, first of all, because they have one lens, a single lens, which sounds pretty obvious, but that is to distinguish them from another type of camera called a TLR, a twin lens reflex camera, that has two lenses. It's called a reflex camera because of a mechanism that's built inside the body of the camera that allows us to see what will be recorded by the camera before we actually take the photograph. And that mechanism is called the reflex mirror. So let me show you that, and then we'll talk about cameras a little more. So this is a film camera. It's an SLR film camera, and I'm showing it to you so that you can see what it looks like, but also because we can open the back of this camera and actually look at the innards, which we can't do with digital cameras. So this is a 35 millimeter camera, which means that it uses 35 millimeter film. And I'm sure you've seen that. It comes in a cassette and it gets inserted here and then pulled across and loaded, and then we close the camera and use the film. This window here is called the shutter, and it is one of two mechanisms that we use to control the amount of light entering the camera. The second is called the aperture, and it is located in the lens. And so it is an adjustable diaphragm that opens and closes that also controls how much light enters the camera. The reflex mirror is built into the body of the camera. And one nice thing about SLRs is that you can take the lenses off and add a different type of lens if you want to. So the reflex mirror is in here, and it's not reflecting too well, but it is here. And it pops up out of the way when you take a photograph. And I want to show you a diagram of the camera, so just one moment. So the SLR single lens reflex camera looks like this from the side. So this big rectangle is the body of the camera, like so. And this thing here is the lens. The purpose of the lens is to focus the light entering the camera. And we'll talk about lenses in a little while. So the light enters the camera through the lens and is then intercepted by the reflex mirror in here. And I've labeled that here. And so the light is then bounced up into this area above the mirror called the pentaprism, and it's called that because it is a five-sided prism. And so the light is bounced around in the pentaprism and then out through the eyepiece to your waiting eye. And so in this way we are able to see what will be recorded by the camera before we actually take the photograph. And so if you look at the construction of the camera, the level of the eyepiece is actually higher than the level of the lens. And so the reflex mirror and the pentaprism are what allows us to see what will be recorded, even though there is this offsetting in height between the level of the lens and the level of the eyepiece. After you've done all your composing and everything, and you want to take the picture, you do that by pushing the button at the top, and that button is called the shutter release button. And when you do that, a few things happen at the same time. Obviously, I can't state them at the same time. But the first thing that happens is that the reflex mirror here pops up out of the way, and this allows the light to pass through back into the body of the camera. This next line here is the shutter, and the shutter which I showed you a couple of minutes ago, opens and closes. So the shutter opens, the mirror pops up out of the way, the shutter opens, and this allows light to pass all the way back into the body of the camera to the film or sensor plane. And this is where the information will be recorded, either onto film, which uses silver technology, or onto a digital sensor, which records the information, converts that information into digital form, and then organizes the information and transfers it to a memory card. After you've taken the picture and those things happen, the shutter closes and the reflex mirror pops back into place and the camera is ready to make another exposure. And that is how, basically, how most cameras work. There are some, excuse me, cameras that do not have reflex mirrors. They're called mirrorless cameras. And there are older cameras of this sort and also newer cameras. They're quieter because the noise that you hear when you take the picture is actually the sound of the reflex mirror popping up out of the way, not the shutter. So those cameras are more quiet and they have other advantages and disadvantages. That said, again, SLRs are the most commonly used cameras both by professionals and many amateur photographers. You do not have to have an SLR for this class, but you do need to have a camera that allows you control over, or that allows you to control the shutter speeds and the aperture settings. Okay, that's it for now.